Long before the age of shattered empires, before iron citadels collapsed into dust and the banners of old kingdoms faded from memory, there ruled a war king whose name was spoken with both reverence and fear. He was mighty in battle, unmatched beneath the weight of armor, and his sword had ended more rebellions than his historians dared to record. Armies obeyed him. Cities lowered their gates before him. Warlords bent their knees when his banners appeared on the horizon. Yet strength alone could not hold his realm together. At night, when the fires burned low and the war drums fell silent, doubt moved through his soldiers like winter mist. Men who had charged beside him by daylight whispered of defeat after sunset. Veterans stared into darkness and remembered every friend who had not returned. Even the king's closest captains began to wonder whether courage could survive endless war. The king heard these whispers, and he despised them. To him, doubt was not caution. Fear was not wisdom. Hesitation was a crack in the soul through which ruin entered. So he sought something stronger than loyalty. He sought resolve that could not break. Beyond the northern ridges stood the Iron Monasteries, ancient sanctums built into the ribs of black mountains. Their halls were not places of prayer, but of discipline. The monks who lived there spoke little, for they believed words weakened the will unless bound by purpose. Among them lived the last alchemists of conviction. They did not brew healing draughts or poisons for kings. They forged vessels for oaths, relics capable of holding emotions too violent for mortal flesh. They claimed resolve could be distilled, fear could be weighed, and the final promise of a dying warrior could be preserved like flame inside glass. When the war king arrived, the monastery bells did not ring. No one welcomed him. At the heart of the deepest forge, the eldest alchemist listened as the king demanded a vessel that would strip hesitation from the spirit.
A soldier who cannot fear cannot retreat,
The king said.
A ruler who cannot doubt cannot fail.
The alchemist answered.
A spirit forced into resolve no longer owns its courage.
But the king had not come for warning. He'd come for dominion. The alchemists agreed to forge the relic, though none did so gladly. They began with a frame shaped like a narrow blade driven into the earth, tall, triangular, and severe. Its three edges represented the pillars of unwavering resolve. Memory, the past that forges the warrior. Duty, the present that demands action. Legacy, the future that will judge what remains. Around the vessel they layered blacksteel, each plate hammered until it rang like a distant war bell. At its crown, two curved horns of tempered metal rose upward, not as decoration, but as symbols of defiance against fate itself. Between those horns hung chains etched with ancient vows. Each link carried the record of a promise made beneath impossible circumstances. A guardian who held a gate until sunrise. A commander who refused surrender with no reinforcements left. A nameless soldier who stood between death and a child he would never know. At the center of the vessel, the alchemists placed a chamber of pale glass. Into it they poured Vowlight. The liquid shimmered like moonlight caught beneath ice. It was not brewed from herbs, minerals, or blood. It was distilled from final promises spoken by warriors who had chosen to stand when retreat would have been easier. The vessel did not merely contain a draught. It contained the weight of every oath that had refused to die. When the forging was complete, the relic stood upon the anvil like a crown made for war rather than rule. The king reached for it, but the eldest alchemist placed one hand between him and the vessel.
This draft does not create courage,
He said.
It awakens what already lives within the bearer.
Then it will find a feast in me.
The king replied. The alchemist did not move.
Listen well. The Vowlight does not strengthen the body as men imagine. It removes hesitation. It dulls fear. It pushes the spirit beyond the point where it would normally yield. but every moment taken beyond mortal limit becomes a debt.
The king's eyes narrowed.
A debt to whom?
To yourself,
Said the alchemist.
to the strength you have not yet spent, to the future your body has not yet reached. Drink too deeply, and the vessel will borrow from what remains of your life.
The king laughed.
What is the future worth if victory is lost today?
The alchemist lowered his hand, and the king took the crown vessel. War came before winter. At the edge of the southern desert, beneath a sky darkened by burning ash, the king's army was surrounded by rival banners. The siege lasted 9 days. Water ran dry, armor cracked, horses collapsed in the sand. Messenger after messenger vanished into the storm winds, carrying pleas for aid that would never be answered. By the 9th night, even the bravest soldiers could no longer hide their despair. Some sharpened their blades in silence. Some prayed to forgotten gods. Others stared toward the enemy fires and waited for dawn, knowing it would bring slaughter. The king walked alone into a ruined shrine, half buried beneath the dunes. There, beneath broken stone and drifting ash, he lifted the crowned vessel for the first time. Inside, the Vowlight pulsed. The chains around the crown trembled softly, as if remembering every oath sealed within them. The king drank. The liquid burned like thunder inside his veins. Fear vanished first, then pain, then hesitation. What remained was clarity so brutal that it felt almost divine. He returned to his army before dawn, carrying the vessel in one hand and his sword in the other. When the enemy charged, the king met them alone. The battlefield changed around him. Blades shattered against his armor. Spears struck, bent and broke. Arrows found gaps in his plate, yet he did not slow. The soldiers behind him saw their king moving through the enemy line like a living avalanche, and something in them ignited. They surged forward, not because fear had vanished from their hearts, but because his refusal to fall reminded them of their own. The crowned vessel did not make the king limitless. It made him continue when limits should have ended him. When his lungs burned, he drew another breath. When his muscles failed, he found another movement. When blood filled his mouth, he spoke another command. Every step was borrowed from a future his body had not yet reached. Every strike was a moment that should not have existed. By sunset, the siege was broken. The enemy fled into the dunes. The king stood victorious, and still he did not lower his sword. At first, the people celebrated him. Songs were sung of the king who could not yield. Statues were raised. Children wore scraps of black cloth tied around their wrists to honor the chains of the crown vessel. His soldiers claimed no army could stand before a ruler whose resolve had become stronger than death. But victory had changed him, or perhaps it had revealed him. The king no longer understood retreat. He no longer recognized mercy as strength. He no longer knew when a battle had already been won. Every border became unfinished duty. Every rival became a future rebellion. Every silence became the sound of enemies gathering beyond sight. He drank before each campaign, then before each battle, then before every decision that required restraint. The Vowlight answered him every time. Yet the more he drank, the more demanding the vessel became. It no longer merely awakened resolve. It fed upon his need for certainty. It filled him with the will of countless warriors, but stripped away the fragile wisdom that once told him when to stop. His wars did not end, they multiplied. The realm he had tried to preserve began to crack beneath the weight of his unbroken purpose. In the final campaign, the king marched against a fortress that had already surrendered. Its gates stood open, its banners lay lowered. Its people waited in silence, offering no resistance. But the king saw hesitation in their eyes, and hesitation had become treason to him. As he raised the crowned vessel once more, his oldest captain stepped forward.
There is no battle here.
The captain said.
Only people who have yielded.
The king looked at him as if seeing a stranger.
Then they must learn never to rise again.
The captain drew his blade, not against an enemy, but against the ruler he had followed all his life. Others joined him, not many, only those whose courage had not yet become obedience. The battle that followed was brief and terrible. The king fought with impossible endurance, moving long after wounds should have ended him. But borrowed moments cannot last forever. At last the debt came due. The king stopped, not because an enemy had struck the killing blow, not because fear had returned, but because his body had no future left to borrow from. He fell to one knee, still gripping the vessel. The Vowlight inside remains half full. The alchemists of the Iron Monasteries came at dawn. They found the battlefield silent, the king dead, and the crowned vessel resting beside him, as if patiently awaiting his next bearer. The eldest alchemist lifted the relic and listened. Within the pale liquid, faint voices stirred. Not only the old vows remained there now, the king's will had entered the vessel too. His refusal to yield had not vanished with his body. It had become part of the draft, sharpening its demand, deepening its hunger, turning the relic from a test of courage into something far more dangerous. The alchemists sealed it beneath the ruins of the shrine where the king had first drunk from it. Around its prison they carved 3 warnings into black stone. The first, resolve without wisdom becomes conquest. The second, endurance without limit becomes debt. The third, an oath is sacred only while the soul still chooses it. Then they buried the shrine beneath the dunes. For a time the world forgot. Centuries passed. Empires rose, fractured, and disappeared. The Iron Monasteries emptied. Their forges went cold. The names of the alchemists were lost, and the War King became a legend told by soldiers on sleepless nights. But legends have a way of returning when fear is strongest. Wanderers crossing the southern desert began to speak of a buried shrine that appeared only beneath ash-colored moons. Some claimed to hear chains moving under the sand. Others saw a pale glow beneath broken stone, steady as breath. Those who found the relic described it the same way. A tall black steel vessel, narrow as a blade. 2 crowned horns curved against fate. Chains etched with vows no living tongue remembered. And within it, a luminous draft that never seemed to empty. Some called it the oath-bound Aegis file. Others named it the vessel of the last oath. But those who understood its full history knew its truest name. The crowned vessel of the last oath. It does not grant strength, it does not create courage. It does not promise victory. It asks only one question of those desperate enough to raise it. Will your resolve be worthy of those who came before? Many have carried it into battle. Few have survived the answer. For the vessel reveals what already lives within the bearer, and then demands to know how much of the future they are willing to spend. When strength fails, it offers one more moment. When fear rises, it offers silence. When the body breaks, it offers motion. But every borrowed moment must one day be repaid. And the crowned vessel remembers every debt.